class. For this video, I just wanted to talk really quick about our final topic of the term, insects. So, what's an insect anyway? Well, by definition, an insect is any of numerous small invertebrate animals, such as spiders or centipedes, that are more or less obviously segmented, or any of a class of arthropods, such as bugs or bees, with well-defined head, thorax, and abdomen, also having only 3 pairs of legs and typically only 1 or 2 pairs of wings. So there are a lot of terms in there that we may not necessarily associate with anything yet. So let's break that definition down just a little bit. So we know from earlier in the term that an invertebrate is an organism without a backbone. We talked about this when we discussed evolution a little bit and when we talked about our taxonomic division, the way we classify different species. So backbones or spines are what is going to give an organism support, among other things. It also provides us with a good deal of protection, keeping all of our soft, fleshy organs safe from any harm from the outside world. So more importantly than that, it's something that insects lack. And what I'm really getting at here is something that makes insects pretty interesting, is that their skeleton is on the outside of their body. So this may be something you have heard of before, or maybe you're a little bit familiar with already, but what I'm really talking about is the exoskeleton. So the exoskeleton is going to be a hard, kind of crunchy layer on the outside of an insect's body that gives them support, protection, among other things. It's made up of different proteins that have kind of come to the outside of the surface, and it's protecting everything inside, where the insect doesn't have bones or muscles or anything like that to protect anything delicate on the inside of its body. So another important characteristic about insects is the division of their body into different segments. So segments, what we're really just talking about, are different pieces. So we're talking about 3 different pieces to the puzzle of an insect body. So we have 3 major components. We have the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. And I hope you can see my happy little bug right here, because he's going to be our example that we use for today. So we have the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. And then, according with that definition we mentioned earlier, we also have 3 little sets of leggies that's going to get him, to and fro. We also have, on this guy, 2 sets of wings. So you'll notice that one is smaller than the other. And what we have here is called the forewing, or the front, or you can think of forward. And these are the primary or more important sets of wings. So these are going to be the wings that give him the most function of the other set. The other set is is a little bit smaller, and it's what we would call the hind wing. So you can think behind or back. So they're typically going to be behind the forewings, and they're going to be a little bit smaller, maybe a lot smaller depending on the species. But these are going to be just kind of additional support for the wings, really. The forewing is going to do most of the work if this is a flying insect, and the hind wing is just kind of there to back it up. On this little guy, he's very pleased to be here. We also have antennae, which are just going to be a part of the insect that helps him kind of navigate his surroundings a little bit. They act a little bit like sensors for different factors in the environment. So some insects can detect temperature this way, some can feel around them to see what their environment is like. Some of them can even detect certain frequencies, maybe from organisms that might like to eat them or cause them harm. For example, a bat emits electromagnetic frequencies, and it does this with its voice. We call it echolocation. So they're able to emit these frequencies that bounce off of objects around them in the environment. And one of the roles of antenna for certain species of bugs is to be able to detect those frequencies, so maybe they know when a bat is nearby. We know some bats like to eat insects, So this could be a really valuable kind of defense mechanism for these insects to have if they know when a predator is coming. So all of these characteristics make up the taxonomic class Arthropoda, which includes a lot of things that we see all the time. Spiders, cockroaches, beetles, ladybugs, all belong to the Arthropoda class. But you know who else does, interestingly enough, is a lot of sea creatures. Lobsters belong to the Arthropoda class. Seahorses belong to that class. Crabs and some species of shrimp even. So we have these two very different organisms that have all of this common kind of ancestry and all these common features. And the real thing to keep in mind here is that although these are very, very different creatures with very different habitats nowadays, let's think about this. If we take a trip way, way, way back to the dawn of time, we start to see a lot of single-celled organisms, a little bit like the paramecium that we discussed. So just as a reminder, the paramecium are going to be something like a loose cell membrane, kind of like we discussed earlier in the term with the cell structure, and the paramecium are going to maybe have some stuff going on in the inside. They might have little things in their cytoplasm. And they're going to have those cilia that come around, remember? So these cilia are like little hairs that help the paramecium navigate around its environment and help him move around. Let's zoom in a little bit to the stuff that this is made of, DNA. So just like we talked about before, we see all of this DNA leading up to arthropods. So they have maybe those crunchy exoskeletons, maybe they even have the legs, and maybe they have this segmented body. And that might have looked, you know, something like this. We also might have had something that looks maybe more like a lobster. And, you know, forgive my excellent lobster drawing. We might have also had something that looked a little bit more like this, something a little bit more well suited from the sea that it came from. So, but following that, there's a change. So different environments for early arthropods through migration, maybe food source availability or changing weather, all led to some early arthropods preferring to live on land. And maybe others preferred to stay in the water where they continued to grow and change. And as they split, each one experienced its own set of changes. And today, we have nearly 1 million species of arthropods in that class of insects. And 90% of them are ones that we see on land and that we know as insects that we kind of commonly see. Somewhere along the line, those early arthropods that preferred the water wound up becoming some 30,000 species, and that's close to what we've seen and been able to identify today. So let's compare them a little bit just for fun. So insects don't actually breathe with their lungs, but they breathe through a little network of tubes called tracheae. Now tracheae are rigid, networked, branched tubes that exist in the insect's body to allow air in. So what does that sound a little bit like? So if you guessed trachea, then you were correct. In humans, we have a structure called a trachea that is right along your neck, and it's a firm pipe made out of cartilage that is hard so that it can stay open to always let air in. Now it connects down to your lungs so that you can always get enough oxygen into your body. This is just another way that we're all connected. Now with an insect, air enters the body through a row of holes along the abdomen. So right along here, our little friend might have some small holes that are going to let air in, and up through those tracheae that are going to oxygenate his body then. Now this is very similar to what we would see in a crustacean in the ocean, except that some of the aquatic arthropods have the ability to actually absorb oxygen from the water around them, which makes them really unique. Others have evolved instead to have fleshy gills, more like what we would see in a fish. And this just shows common ancestry again between fish and aquatic arthropods with gills. It shows that somewhere along the line, they shared that gene to grow gills and get their oxygen that way. This week's going to be a lot of fun because we're going to get to meet a real live creepy crawly insect, and I think you all will like her. Until then, have fun, and I will see you next Wednesday.